And you're tuned in to Anything Goes, internationally syndicated radio. I'm Lise Avery, and we're chatting today with Alex Mendham about Dance Across the Atlantic, a transatlantic crossing on the Queen Mary 2, hosted by AhoyVintageCruises.com. Nice to meet you, Alex.
It's wonderful to meet you too, Lise.
So tell us where you're sitting exactly right now.
So I'm sitting at my home in Cornwall, so right down on the edge of the UK, facing the US.
Facing.
Yeah, I'm in my music room, and yeah, that's where I am right now. I bought a house down here a little while ago, just before the pandemic. I was very lucky, and but a lot of my work takes place in London, so I'm back and forth all the time.
How far is that exactly?
It's about 5 hours in the car,
Wow.
so
Yeah,
so
yeah.
a fair old drive, but I'm used to it now. So, and I've got lots of friends and family back up in London, which is where I'm originally from. So, whenever I've got a gig, I take time and just also treat the family to a nice meal out or something like that, and
Lovely.
get a gig. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. So you're sitting in your music room. Tell us what that means.
Well, I'm a collector of 78s. So I go right back to the 1920s and 30s with a lot of the music I collect. I was very lucky to come into contact with lots of older record collectors as I was coming up, listening to the music, and I've inherited more records than I know what to do with. I've got, gramophones here, record players, radio players from the 20s and 30s. And this is where a lot of my, practice goes on. So when I'm singing, this is a quiet space for me to switch off and really focus on my music. So it's a sanctuary, really, as well as a music room.
You have recording equipment in there as well?
Some sort of primitive recording equipment, through the lockdown, it was pretty handy to have a quiet space to do
Hmm.
some multi-tracking and stuff like that. But mostly this is like a practice room, really.
Okay, neat. So I'm glad you told everybody that your record collection was 20s and 30s,
Mhm.
but a little birdie told me you were born in 1989. So, say what? I mean, you
Yeah.
all people listening, we all feel you.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
where does yours come from?
Well, when I was 11, I there was a girl who came into our school, and she was demonstrating musical instruments, and she brought along with her a saxophone, and it was the first time I'd ever seen one in person. I didn't go and see live music before then or anything, but I just thought, wow, what is this instrument? And wanted to learn more, and eventually begged my parents to let me have saxophone lessons.
Huh.
Um, and so I started on sax just with a private teacher, and she would sometimes come into the school. But I really didn't know what to listen to because there wasn't really a lot of saxophones in, music that everybody else was listening to at the time. Um, so I started to go to music shops, and there was a record shop that was local to me called Borders. It's an American shop. I'm not sure if
Hmm.
they're even still going, but
I don't know
uh,
either.
this is in the days really before YouTube even took off, and it was before Spotify or streaming. But they had a way where you could scan the barcode of a CD and hear the first few seconds of each track. And so I thought I should head to the jazz section. I play the saxophone, and all of a sudden I stumbled across a CD with a young man, and he had a cornet on his lap, and it was an old-fashioned photograph, and it really sort of intrigued me.
I already
And
know who it is.
yeah, and it was the first track was Goose Pimples by Bix Beiderbecke, and from then I was just like a wow moment. I just thought, what is this music? This is sort of like everything that I imagined, jazz could be, and it was exciting and like totally different from anything I'd heard, but lots of energy. It didn't sound like it was old. It sounded fresh and new. And then all of a sudden, I started to, Google like who plays this music today, and the first guy that come up was Vince Giordano, and that started an exchange of emails when I was only 14, 15.
Really? Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
wow. Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And I got all of the films, like the Woody Allen films that he's in and all of that stuff, and he was really a big inspiration on my journey, or the beginnings of my journey. And and then at 17, he said, why don't you come over and just see how I run the Nighthawks and bring your saxophone and meet everyone. And yeah, it was amazing.
He's
That
a
was a real,
fabulous person. He's a really
yeah, yeah.
fabulous person. So tell me, which house did you stay in? The one where he lives or the one where all the records are?
I stayed, well, they're both full of stuff, uh,
I
but I stayed
couldn't
in the
believe it when
one.
he told me he had
Uh,
two houses.
I stayed in the one that also houses the people.
Oh, that was, there you go. See, that lets you know where you ranked.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so, what other early influences did you have before you met Vince
Before I met Vince,
Giordano?
okay. So I had my grandmother. She used to go around to the shops every day, and there was in the local parade of shops there was also a charity shop, it was a St. Luke's hospice shop, and they had lots of vinyls for sale, just the things that people had donated over the years, and she
Hmm.
would bring me home with her. They would only cost like £1 or £2, but
Hmm.
she would bring trad jazz
Oh,
vinyls,
wow. Yeah, yeah.
and so that was another sort of influence. I mean, it sounded similar to the 20s and 30s, and like they were sort of trying to recreate the music of the hot fives and sevens,
Uh-huh.
but it had a British tinge to it. And then there was another recreation band in the 70s called the Temperance Seven, and they had a big hit with "You're Driving Me Crazy." They had a top 10 hit. I think that may have even gone to number one in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
And they were doing a slightly different version of that again, which was like a 20s recreate. They were recreating palm court orchestras in the 70s, and
Uh-huh.
it was kind of corny, but it still it was like a gateway drug into the real stuff.
That's very funny.
Yeah. So yeah, that was another influence. So I was encouraged early on to dig back into the 20s and 30s. And yeah.
And you are tuned in to Anything Goes internationally syndicated radio. I'm Lise Avery, and we are talking with Alex Mendham about Dance Across the Atlantic, which is a transatlantic crossing, you guys, on the Queen Mary 2, hosted by AhoyVintageCruises.com. And if you don't get your tickets through AhoyVintageCruises.com, they don't let you in. So tell us, Alex, you studied with Bob Wilbur?
Yes. Yep. So that was another offshoot of the whole Vince Giordano connection.
Huh?
So I became quite good friends with Dan Levinson, uh,
Oh, no
being
kidding. Okay.
being a sax player, and he visited the UK with a Californian band, Dean Mora and his Modern Rhythmists, and Dan came with him, and we were chatting during a break, and he said, there's a really great sax player in the UK. He goes right back to the 40s and 50s and played with people like Sidney Bechet, studied with Bechet, and yeah, I think that you'd make a good candidate for a student.
Uh-huh.
And so Bob didn't really take on students. He sort of said, I only take on prodigies, and you can be my protege. So I had to go over there for like an interview almost. They had a flat in Paddington in London,
Uh-huh.
and he and his wife were there, and it was. I mean, I didn't take my saxophone or anything. I just went there and spoke about my love for all the things that he also loved, and he said, "Why don't you come and study saxophone and then eventually clarinet as well, because you got to play both."
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
and so he had a house in the Cotswolds in the UK, and every week I would travel on the train from London to the Cotswolds and stay for a couple of days, and it would be like 2 hours lesson, but the rest of the time we'd just be talking about Eddie Condon and playing at Nick's and all this stuff in the 40s and 50s, and knowing Miff Mole and the Dorsey brothers, and it was mad to have this sort of key to another world, really, and to just meet somebody firsthand who'd been there and done it.
How lovely. And well, it was lovely for him to have somebody to share it with, I'm sure,
Yeah,
as
yeah,
well. So you formed your own orchestra at age 20? That's pretty
yes,
extraordinary.
yeah. It's still mad.
Yes, well, that I was going to go there, but I thought I'd stick with extraordinary.
Um, yes, I was quite young. So my my mum and dad, I come from a working class background, and so I had the saxophone, and I loved music, and I was going to my lessons with Bob. And then they said, well, what are you going to do for money? What are you going to do for a real job? And
Sounds like
so I
parents.
uh, so I got a job in London, working in like a financial type job, and I was bored as hell, so just doing this like number crunching and just typing in stuff to databases. But there was a club around the corner, which from where I worked, which was like a burlesque club, basically like a strip club.
Oh
And
man.
yeah, and they were closed on a Monday. And taking a leaf out of Vince's book, I knocked on the door and I said, you're closed on a Monday night. I said, I've got an orchestra. Would you allow me to, if you open the doors on a Monday night, we could take the ticket prices and you take the bar? And they said, that's great. That's a great idea. We'll do it. So they gave me a trial of 3 dates, but I didn't have an orchestra. So over the space of about 2 weeks, I put an advert in the
Oh,
musician union paper asking for musicians, young guys and girls that were interested in the music of the 20s and 30s, and I got about 100 replies. So there wasn't a lot of work to go around, I don't think, with young musicians. But I said to the club, I said, would you mind if on one of the days when you're closed, I come in and we can just do a rehearsal? And they said, sure. And they had a piano down there to accompany a lot of the acts they normally had. So that was the basis of my audition. So I basically got these guys and split them off into groups and whittled the whole thing down until I eventually sort of landed up on 11 pieces that we use. And we went in and did those first 3 dates, and that was how it started. And
that's
and then
marvelous. That's a marvelous story. I love that.
and then a few months later, I chucked the job in the city. So that began my full-time
And
music career.
and
Yeah.
then you ended up at the Savoy.
Yes. That was another lucky chance. There was a lady who was booked to play the Savoy for New Year's Eve, and uh she pulled out at the last minute with about a week to go, and they had a 20s theme, and I got the call. I was in the right place at the right time, and that New Year's Eve went well, and the residency started from there, really. And that was our springboard to doing everything else that we've done. Yeah.
Sometimes, well, that's a beautiful thing, is all I can say. So, when people come to experience Alex Mendham and his orchestra, uh, give us an idea of what that's like. I mean, I am a vocalist and I book musicians, and they generally want to wear sweatpants and sneakers, right? And
Yes.
you have to wrestle them to wear a jacket. So,
Yeah.
but I get the feeling that's not what you're doing. So tell me about that.
Well, another prong to this whole thing was my mum was always into black and white films when we grew up.
Yeah.
So they were always on the television, and behind everything that was going on behind Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, there was always inevitably a band of young men with their hair slicked back and black and white tuxedos, and I thought, well, that is the package, and I grew up with also watching a lot of jazz. So sometimes I'd go and watch Bob Wilber, and he would be playing with I don't know, an orchestra of young guys from a college or something like that. And then again, like you say, they'd all be in sweatpants and jeans. And I just thought that something was missing. Um, and it was the look. So I I basically costumed the orchestra. So I went around to vintage shops and secondhand stores, Goodwills,
Wow.
and I basically amassed a wardrobe of vintage tuxedos, stiff fronted shirts, the whole thing. And I mean, that's coming handy later on when we've done some background work for films, because it's one package. But my main thing was to try and transport people that were watching the orchestra to an earlier time. And I think if something is missing, then that kind of the illusion is broken. So the whole thing is kind of like it's like a costume show. It's not just a band playing for a performance. although it is that, and we're very serious also about the music.
Of course.
But I want to transport people back to the 20s and 30s, to a more glamorous time where the music was also glamorous, I suppose. And I think that people took a lot of care and pride in the music, and yeah, that's what I tried to recreate with the band. Yeah.
So, when people come to see you, well, what age groups are coming to see you? Do you have any 20 somethings? I know who listens to
Yes.
Anything Goes, and it always
Yeah.
surprises me.
Yeah. So when we started out about 10 years ago, we had a sort of mostly an older audience, I would say, that people that
Hmm.
sort of you know, they recognized my music, and they kind of they put it together with a lot of other big band and swing music that they like.
Hmm.
Um, but then I think as time's gone on, there's been things like Downton Abbey, which has been a big hit. Vince did The Aviator and all those great
Oh my
things like
goodness.
Boardwalk Empire, and that has really helped bring a lot of younger people in to this music. And when I play in London, we do get an older crowd, but we also get younger people that are into the idea of being transported back to an earlier time. So they wear, they're into vintage clothing, they're into, vintage fashion, and they're into the
1940s,
whole,
baby.
yeah, yeah, that's it. So they're into the whole spectacle. So
Right.
it's a real cross section
Uh-huh.
of ages. Dancers as well, people that also love to dance, and there's a big swing dance scene here, but also people that are into the music.
So, speaking of dancing,
Mhm.
I understand you do a bit of hoofing yourself.
Well, a little bit. I'm good friends with Rusty Frank, who's a wonderful tap dancer, originally from San Francisco,
Uh
and
huh.
she's helped me throughout the pandemic. She's been sending me online lessons,
Oh,
and
neat.
that's one of the things that I brushed up on during the pandemic. Some people got fat, and some people got fit, and I did both of those things, and then I tap danced as well.
So, somewhere in that music room, there's a little square of wood that you
That's
do
right.
tap
Yeah,
dancing on.
yeah, yeah.
And you're tuned into Anything Goes internationally syndicated radio. I'm Lise Avery. We're chatting with Alex Mendham. He's going to be doing a really interesting gig called Dance Across the Atlantic, which is a transatlantic crossing on the Queen Mary 2, hosted by AhoyVintageCruises.com. And you can get more information at AhoyVintageCruises.com. So, tell us, sometimes, Alex, you perform on the Atlantic Ocean. So
Yes.
tell us about that.
Well, when we used to perform at the Savoy, there was a very flamboyant Texan who would come in to see us, and he'd always make himself known, and he was sort of this larger than life character. And he introduced himself as Tom Pacina, and he's been doing cruises for a long time, like vintage themed cruises. So he will book, bands and artists. And he said, if you ever want to do a 30s crossing, I think, we should partner up on that. So I've always loved the romance of travel, and a lot of the bands that would perform on these big ocean liners. And I just thought it would be a really neat thing to get the band across to New York, and for the 7 nights that we're doing it, play each night, and just make it a really fun uh, dress up event. And I think it captured people's imagination because it's been really well received. So I'm really really excited about that. That's going to be taking place in April, late April.
And of course, it's on the Queen Mary too,
Oh
which
yeah, yeah. They don't
that
too many.
also conjures all sorts of wonderful images of An Affair to Remember and old Fred Astaire films,
Yes,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yes, we've got a wonderful vocalist called Alison Young joining us. She's from Tennessee, and she's like a YouTube singer, and she's great. And we've got the regular 11-piece band, all the regular guys. So it's going to be a really nice party, really.
Lovely. Now, on the Dance Across the Atlantic with AhoyVintageCruises.com, do people get to hang out with you? And the band,
Yeah. So
because they're gonna. I mean, they're all gonna want to.
yeah, so we're performing. I say only we're performing for a couple of hours a day in
Uh
the
huh.
evening,
Uh huh.
but the rest of the time we are just guests on the ship. So we'll be milling around. We have private events scheduled for, the group, so that we're going to have like cocktail parties with the band, and there'll be like a sing along in one of the smaller lounges.
Uh huh.
And name that tune. There's going to be lots of smaller events as well as the big events in the
Uh huh.
evening. And we're going to be on the deck, just chilling out, and it's going to be fun. And lots of, like-minded people that are into the costume and the escapism of the whole thing, but also that they're into dancing, they're into the 20s and 30s. So I think that if they love that feel and that era, then this is an event not to be missed.
And the Queen Mary 2 has the largest ballroom at sea, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah, the Queen's Room, where we're performing each night, that's the largest ballroom at sea. I'm not sure how many ballrooms there are at sea. There can't be many, but
An interesting point.
but it's the largest, yeah.
And you guys will be doing how many performances during the
Seven.
crossing? So every
Seven.
single night?
Every night there's a performance with the band. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. And as I believe I mentioned before, other passengers who are on the Queen Mary 2 who might have booked through some other entity, they're not allowed into these dances, right? You
No,
can't buy a ticket. You have to book your
it will
passage.
be unlucky. Yeah,
Yeah, and disappointed.
yeah, yeah.
You have to book through AhoyVintageCruises.com, period, exclamation point.
Yes.
Yep, that velvet rope, no matter how cute you are,
No,
does
that's
not.
it. That's it. Everyone's going to be provided with a nice Ahoy Vintage Cruise badge when they arrive. And if you haven't got one of those, you're not coming in.
But there you go. I like it. Talk about an exclusive club. So it's really, if you choose to, it's going to be a really immersive vintage event on the Queen Mary 2 with vintage music and vintage events and vintage cocktail parties. But if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily own all those vintage clothes, that's okay too, right? If you just have a
Yeah.
little black dress and a nice suit, that's okay.
Yeah, so it's not an exclusive. We don't want to be exclusive about anything, and the whole thing is about welcoming people into this I suppose community, for want of a better words.
Right.
Um, I want people to enjoy themselves, but not to the cent, not to the. I don't want it to go too far where people think that it's so strict that they can't be a part of the whole thing. So I want people to feel happy. These things are only ever things like encouragement. It's like, black tie, but if you don't have black tie, you know,
Not exactly come as you are, but come with what you got.
that's it. Yeah.
Right? It's a suspension of time, but we still realize that we're in 2022
Oh, for
and
sure.
your business suit and your little black dress
Yeah.
is fine.
I mean, I'm still going on there with an iPhone, and I'm still going to be checking my emails every day. So,
Oh, that's
yeah,
true. That's an addiction that I think most of
yeah,
us can't get away from. So
yeah.
tell us, speaking of old music and transatlantic crossings on the
Hmm.
Queen Mary 2, tell us about, you have made, I want to point out the picture record behind me, right
Oh,
there.
yeah.
I've got a picture record there.
Oh,
And you've just made a picture record, haven't you, of
yes.
Queen of the Seas?
Yeah, so The Queen of the Seas is a song that wasn't recorded by many bands. I think it was only recorded by one or two bands in the UK. And there's a disc. So I've become friends over the years with various record collectors. And on one visit to this guy's house, he said, "Hey, have you ever seen this?" And he put it in my hands, and it had the Queen Mary on one side, and it was a beautiful painting. And then on the other side, it was a souvenir recording of this song.
Wow.
Um, and I thought, we could probably do that. And so we went into the studio, and so we had the same arrangement transcribed, and we performed it and re-recorded it, and we stamped it, and yeah, it's got a nice illustration on one side, and on the other side is Alex Mendham and his orchestra playing Queen of the Seas. Would you
And
believe it?
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, and you can find that as well as Alex's other CDs at AlexMendham.com. How many other CDs have you recorded, Alex?
I think I've done about 5 or 6 now
Ah,
with the
slacker.
band. Yeah. Um, uh,
Wow.
Off to a slow start, but we're catching up. And I mean, I found that a lot of things have gone over to streaming now, which makes it sort of difficult to justify the expense of getting all the orchestra in and recording the band. But we've had some, really great. We've got some great fans out there that every time we do like a Kickstarter or something for a new album, it seems to come good, and that gets us through. But a lot of the CDs, because we haven't been able to do gigs, it's been difficult to shift them. But but now that gigs are coming back and things are opening up, it's great to be able to get music out there that we've been sitting on for a year, and just getting the fans, getting the music to the fans.
That's lovely. And I understand, I know the fact that the gigs are coming back. Um, I've heard from just looking around that the Queen Mary 2 is very, very careful with their COVID restrictions,
Mm,
and they take it all very, very seriously. So it is a
absolutely.
fairly safe place to be, I
Yes.
would think, at this time.
Yeah.
And you are tuned in to Anything Goes Internationally Syndicated Radio. I'm Lisa Avery, and we're speaking with Alex Mendham of Alex Mendham and His Orchestra, the youngest band leader to play at the Savoy Ballroom. Very, very impressive. And Alex is going to be bringing his orchestra on the Queen Mary 2, courtesy of AhoyVintageCruises.com, for a dance across the Atlantic. And then you'll also be performing at the Rainbow Room?
Yes. So on our arrival, we arrive on a Sunday, and then on the Monday night, we have two shows at the Rainbow Room. We have a matinee from 5 until 7, I believe. No, sorry, beg your pardon, from 3 until 5 p.m., and then from 7 until 10. So we have sort of like an afternoon tea. So if people want to come and have a nice tea dance, and then in the evening we've got a dinner show. So that's going to be
That's
amazing.
lovely. I love the idea of a tea dance. I really do. I don't know that anybody's ever done that before. Have they? Have That's an
Not at the
unusual
Rainbow
thing
Room.
for New York City.
Yeah.
Well, there's
Well,
tea. There's definitely tea, but I don't know if I've heard of a tea dance. I love that.
yeah. So maybe that's something I'll be bringing over with me. But at the Savoy, we always did a tea dance. So, or there would sometimes just be a cocktail pianist, but people would come in for afternoon tea. So finger sandwiches and a bit of champagne. So maybe that's something they could start up in New York. I think that would be a good thing. It's quite
Yeah,
civilized.
it sounds very civilized, actually. And you're working right now on something called Fine and Dandy. Tell us
Yes.
about that.
So I've got a concert coming up next Friday at the Wiltshire Music Centre. And for that, the concert is based around female composers of the 20s and 30s, and Fine and Dandy being one of the greats by Kay Swift. And so we're digging in, but we're also going to sort of find a lot of unsung heroes. So people, normally go to the same 3 or 4 female composers, but we're digging back, and we've got some wonderful compositions, things like "Close Your Eyes," that was also sung by Al Bowley, which also brings us to the second part of the concert, which is a tribute to the opening of the Rainbow Room. So, in preparation for our concert at the Rainbow Room, we've tracked down the opening night's program, and we're going to recreate that for the second half of the concert, but also prepare that repertoire for when we play at the Rainbow Room in New York. So there's lots going on, and that's maybe a convoluted way of telling you, but yeah, we've got lots of stuff going on. I'm transcribing "I Can't Give You Anything But Love" by Maya Davis,
Uh huh.
who was a New York band leader at the time in the 20s, um, and it's going to just be a good a spread of celebration for those female composers.
That
Yeah.
sounds absolutely, absolutely delightful. Well, it has been absolutely delightful to meet you, Alex Mendham.
Well,
And I'm
thank you for
so
having me.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's really a pleasure. I really can't believe that we haven't encountered each other before, and I'm hoping that we'll get to encounter each other in person sometime very, very soon. And I
Yeah,
will
when I'm
be
in New York.
I'll be tagging Vince Giordano
Yeah.
any minute now. And if anybody's interested in more information about Alex and his work with his orchestra, you can go to AlexMendham.com. Thank you so much, Alex. Take
Thank you,
care,
Julie.
be safe, and have a good a good crossing across the pond. Be
Yeah.
safe. Thanks
Cheers.
so much. Bye.